This is Faith Works, and right now I'm here with Benjamin Dunn, and I'm Beck Ewing, and basically what we're going to be talking today is there is a election coming up for South Carolina Senate Seat 20, and in fact there's a runoff that's going to be happening on August 28th, and I'm just wanting to allow you guys to be able to get to know some of the candidates, and here is Benjamin Dunn. So hey, Ben.
Good morning, Beck. It's very nice to be here with you.
Well, thanks for being here with us on Faith Works. And, I just wanted to have a little chat with you to start off with. And so to start off with, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you come from? What's been your family life? Tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. I grew up in the upstate, just outside of Clemson. Mm-hmm. And both my parents actually have retired from Clemson and still live up there. I also went to Clemson, so there's a lot of Clemson in the background.
So how does that feel, being in, coming from Clemson and living in Gamecock land?
Well, I came here too. I came to Columbia to attend law school.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
I have hit them both.
Wow. So you're like a meld of the two, right?
A little bit, but I am ultimately a Clemson guy.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, you gotta
go Tigers, apparently.
Yeah, I gotta have first love, I suppose. But yeah, so I came here in the mid '90s to attend law school, and met my wife while I was there, and we decided to stay here and raise our family, and been here ever since.
Awesome. So how many kids do you have? Four. And their ages?
They are 15, 13, 11, and 9.
Wow. So what would you say is your biggest takeaway from being a father?
That I have a lot to learn. My parents, of course, like most folks, taught me more than they'll ever know, and Lord willing, I'm doing the same for my kids. But it's amazing how much they teach you, and about yourself and about life, and it gives you just a little bit of a glimpse of maybe what it's like from God's perspective dealing with us, and how there's just a lot that we don't get.
Mm-hmm. No, I get you there. What would you say is your favorite thing about being a lawyer?
I think the part that I like the best is that you get a little glimpse into the world of other folks.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I do some things related to real estate, some contractual disputes, some employment law, and in all those areas, you kind of you get a little taste of what somebody in a completely different industry, what they do on a daily basis, and what they need to excuse me, to make their to make their business work. And it's just kind of neat.
So you get to be a part, you get to learn their story, and then you get to be a part of their story and being able to help them out with that.
Yeah, I guess that's a very poetic way of putting it. Yes.
Tell me about your faith. Who is God to you?
As you look through the Bible and you understand that God, most often it seems to me, talks about His role and relationship with us as being that of a parent, and I think as I've gotten older, I think I do understand that better. And again, having the kids, I think, is a bit of a help, because you look at your kids in their various stages of development, and you kind of remember back, when you were that age and how you looked at the world, and you understand that even though they're bright, intelligent, wonderful, creative folks, that there's still so much that they just don't know and understand. Mm-hmm. And like I said, that I think that gives you a little window into what it's like for God looking at us, because there is so much that we will never understand in this life. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the older you get, the more you, or at least for me, the more you realize the importance of faith and trust, that mm-hmm. you because we will understand more as we get older, and as we study and we learn and we grow closer to Christ. But at the same time, we are never going to understand it all. And that's where the faith piece comes in, that you really have to, there's a lot of things that you just have to let go of and know that God is sovereign. And even though there are things that happen in this world that you wish wouldn't, that God ultimately is still in control, and that he has a plan, and that I guess our job is to submit and sort of subsume our will to his, so that we get on the course we need to be on.
Sure. So, what would you say has been, as I hear from you that you grew up in church, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. So, there's, all of us have a time in which our faith becomes important to us. And so, what would you say in your life has happened, and, when maybe your faith became important to you, and what was the change, and what has that change been like for you?
I think for me, it was probably early adulthood. I think you grow up, and you're first year kid, and you're in school, and then okay, you're going to go to middle school, and then you're going to go to high school, and then you're going to do career or college. And for me, it was college, and then I kind of decided I was interested in doing this law thing, so it was law school. All right, so you go through all that, and in my case, you get out, and now you're a lawyer. That's great. You got a job. All right, well, so you've been kind of block checking, for all these years of your life. Well, now what comes next? And I think for me, that's when I really started to think more deeply about what's the meaning of all this. And again, I had grown up in church, and I think I was 11 when I did the walk down the aisle and
right.
Pray a sinner's prayer,
the prayer and everything,
and all that. But it definitely became much more real to me, like I said, in that young adult piece. And then, of course, you get married, and that's a big change. But then you have kids, and that's a
eye opener.
A huge paradigm shift in the way you look at things. Because even with your spouse, I mean, they're
not just dependent on you as children are.
They're their own adult.
Yeah.
And you met them. You when you came together, you were both self-sufficient adults, so to speak. But once you have that, and of course your parents, they were the ones who were helping you out. But once you start having those kids, wow, I mean,
you're responsible for them. Yeah.
And that is, and I know most people go through this, but it's just an amazing eye opener, and it does tend to give you a little deeper perspective, I think, on things.
Yeah, no, I myself, walked down an aisle and all the different type of stuff when I was younger. And, as I was becoming into later teenager and college years is when it really started to become more real and personal to me too. I think all of us have that point in which we start to, that at least those of us of faith, that the faith starts becoming how we see the world and how we understand our responsibility to it, and to the Lord, really. What motivated you to join the National Guard?
I guess I'd always had an interest in the military. My dad had gone through ROTC in college and had become an officer, and he ended up getting kind of sucked into the first big build-up in Vietnam. And so he did a tour in Vietnam as an infantry platoon leader, and then came back and did his graduate work, and again spent a career as an academic. But I'd always identified with that, from a very early age, and really respected my dad's service and the sacrifices that he had made. So something that I was very interested in doing. So I got a commission, and I knew that when I got through mid-college, I was pretty sure that I was going to go on to some kind of graduate school, and ended up being law school. So I went into the Guard and drilled. And then, of course, after 9/11, the war started up, and it became much busier. So
I can imagine. So what is your position within the National Guard? Like, what do you do?
right now I'm a lieutenant colonel. I spent most of my career as an infantry officer,
Okay.
but the last few years I've been an air defense artillery officer, and I'm in what's called the 678th Fires Brigade, which is located here in the Columbia area.
Yeah, okay. So what would you say motivated you to run for office?
I got tired of complaining, I suppose.
But isn't complaining just so comfortable?
It can be, and I really like issues and discussing them and thinking through them and debating them. I enjoy that. I guess I kind of felt like this was the political office was something I could be good at. Now I've never held elective office yet, so who knows. But it's something I've always had an interest in, and the seat I'm running for now, of course, District 20. The whole reason we're having a special election is due to unfortunate circumstances, and with John Corson having resigned, and I hate the fact that we're having to have this special election at all. But when this opportunity came open, I prayed about it, I thought about it. You talk to family and close friends about it, and it just seemed like this was something I should do, at least attempt to run for the office.
Sure. So what do you think are the biggest issues in South Carolina right now?
We've got a lot, and that's not. I don't say that in a depressed way. I mean, it's the very imperfect world we live in.
Sure.
There's always a lot that's going to need to be done, but I do think that there are a number of areas where we really need to focus. And just some examples of those: the roads and infrastructure. That's been a big deal over the last few years. I would like to see us focus more of our resources on maintaining the roads we have and roads, bridges, infrastructure we have, rather than constantly building so much new road mileage. I think over the last 3 years, we've spent about 3 times the amount on new road construction that we have on maintenance. And new roads are fine and great, and there are some places we absolutely need them. But at the same time, you got to remember that every mile of road you build today, you're going to be maintaining forever. So I think we need to maybe dial back what we're doing new construction wise and really focus our resources on maintaining what we already have and getting that into a better shape of repair and maintenance. And then we can go forward perhaps in looking at what new infrastructure that we need. I guess, defunding Planned Parenthood is something we've gotten very close to here in the last couple of years. And I would like to see us finally, push that across. Term limits for our legislators. I think if we had term limits, there wouldn't be this special election. I think that what happens is when people get into an office and they stay there for decades on end, that over time it's just human nature that instead of looking at your seat as a position of service, it becomes more of a possession. And when that happens, I think you end up seeing things like what happened that caused this special election in the first place. So I do think that we need to implement term limits. And then, there's a host of other issues. Taxation, we need to lower our tax rates overall and simplify the way we collect taxes. One of the biggest things that I think really should jump out at a lot of people is that our corporate tax rate is 5%, and North Carolina last year dropped their corporate tax rate to 3%. Now, of course, individuals aren't paying that, but the place where you or your family members work very well may be. And so, in terms of keeping business here and attracting new business. Right now, Charlotte is going to look like a much better environment than, say, Columbia or Greenville, and we need to rectify that. And same thing, I think we need to lessen the tax burden on individuals, particularly your middle class folks. That's where I'd like to really see us focus those breaks.
I wanted to go into a more specific, kind of more the second issue that you said when it comes to defunding Planned Parenthood. In your personal views, what is your view of regarding life in the womb? Like, what is your view on that?
I've always been a pro-life guy. I believe that life starts at conception. The personhood legislation that came pretty close to being passed this year. Certainly way closer than it has
yes, definitely
previously.
Closer.
I've already said that I would sponsor it and support it and push it. Kind of at every, in between committee and out of committee and in session, out of session, all that sort of thing. So anything that we can do to end the practice of abortion, we need to do. Mm-hmm. Because again, life does start at conception. Now, I guess a couple of things I think that we as Christians, who are pro-life, that we need to do a better job of and to be more cognizant of is, one, we need to always strive to utterly outcompete the abortion provider folks in the marketplace of ideas, because you have these women, oftentimes they're younger, and they find themselves in a situation that they didn't anticipate. They're scared. They don't know what it is to do, and if they hear 100 loving, caring, Christ-like voices for every one they hear of Planned Parenthood, then that puts them in a much better place to make the right choice to sustain life.
What do you think is going to take for that to happen?
Particularly as Christians, I really focus on the community of faith because this is our responsibility. Mm-hmm. I think that we just have to do a better job of living and loving the way Christ told us to. Because again, we can outlaw abortion tomorrow, but murder and rape and theft and lying under oath, all those things have been illegal forever. Mm-hmm. Do they still go on? Yes, unfortunately they do. Mm. And abortion is the same way. So yes, we need to change the law. Yes, we need to do things like enact personhood legislation and outlaw abortion. And of course, there's things at the federal level that have to happen too with that. But ultimately, we are going to defeat abortion with love way more than law.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. That to me, the pro-life stance is really very inclusive. So in the sense of that, it's a love of life from conception until death. And so I think one of the accusations that has been leveled at the pro-life community is that we're just pro-birth. We don't actually care about people afterwards. I would actually like to argue that point just a little bit, because I usually find that the people who are actually active in pro-life views are also active in helping people. What I often find is people who say that they're pro-life, but they do nothing in either of those
Sure.
particular issues. So which comes to making sense. So if you love people enough for them not to want to die, you also usually love people enough to want to help them as they're living. And so if we can understand how that comes together and become active in both, I agree we should be able to see a real forwardness in this particular issue. Now, the thing about personhood legislation, it is a little bit different than a lot of other pro-life legislation that is out there right now. It does not allow for cases of rape or incest. It actively challenges Roe versus Wade. And this is actually something that scares a lot of people or makes them uncomfortable. So what would you say to somebody who is asking you about the fact that it doesn't allow for rape and incest?
when you're talking about abortion and all the issues that surround it, I mean, it's the entire, Pandora's box of all the horrific things that people do to one another. And you can pull up situations that are just horrific. First and foremost, we've got to love people.
Sure.
Now, some people will say, well, now wait a minute, I'm pro-life and I get that, but wow, when you get into these areas of rape and incest, which admittedly, if you look at, statistically the folks who are getting abortions, obviously that's a very tiny piece, but still
right.
that's real. We're talking about real people and real lives and things they're going through. I don't pretend to say that these aren't really tough, hard situations. They are. I guess the issue for me though is in these rape or incest cases, you're dealing with generally a younger woman who has been through hell, and at the same time though you have this new life, and I certainly don't in any way wish to put any pain or further stress on an already horrific situation for the young lady, but at the same time, you can't pretend it never happened. You can't snuff out, the God-given spark of life. And a lot of people will say that two wrongs in this situation don't make a right. That's true, but again, we should never say that in kind of flippant or cursory way, because we need to love and cherish and care for again, most of the time, young lady who's going through this every bit as much as we do for the child that's involved. You see a goal like, hey, we want to outlaw abortion. That's something we can all work to and get around and get behind. And as pro-life people, I think for all of us, the more difficult piece though is the day in and day out, dealing with the needs of people, loving people. It's much harder to love and to do that consistently than it is to let's all rally behind the cause. We need to do both.
Right. Well, I actually see that I've been involved with the process of different pro-life legislation and things like that. And I see that there's actually difficulty in both because it's so easy in the moment in which you're sitting in a committee and, trying to decide whether to further personhood legislation or not. And then you hear the other side, and most likely it is a woman that is some type of representative or senator or something, and they'll look a supporter of pro-life legislation in the face and say, how could you ever, think about forcing a young woman who's been raped to have that baby? And that is you can sit there and sense that you feel sorry for that particular situation. And oftentimes you see the senator or the representative just kind of fold or stumble around and stuff like that, because I think a lot of the narrative has been that children in these situations are a curse and that they're harmful to the mother, and so therefore how could you say that this particular child. Now, I've personally have worked with people who have been raped and have conceived through incest and stuff like that. And I can tell you that actually the narrative's the opposite. That actually having the child and is usually a healing process, because something good comes out of something bad, which is a very Christian kind of concept and grace, that God allows something good to come out of something bad. Not because the bad thing was good, but because he wants to take a bad situation and bring good of it. So in other words, beauty out of ashes. And so there's a life that has now promise and a future and can love and be loved. And so love can come out of something as horrible as rape and incest. And so I totally agree with you. We need to learn to love these people and be sensitive to them. But like I said, on the other side, I do believe it's going to take a lot of courage to be able to stand up for the children that have no voice
Sure.
during those particular things, because all life is equally valuable, with no matter how they've come to be.
Right.
And so, and I know that's part of the reason why that you have supported personhood legislation, as opposed to, saying I'm pro-life, but I'm not going to say personhood in this particular case. I would say the other thing that makes people uncomfortable about personhood legislation is in regards to its challenge to Roe versus Wade. So you're a lawyer. What would you say is the idea of the Supreme Court? True or false? The Supreme Court puts forth the law of the land.
I don't think that is in any way what was intended by our founders, and I don't really see that as in any way what the Constitution calls for.
Okay.
Now, and abortion particularly is a great example of that. I think abortion should be illegal, but in terms of my preferred method of getting there,
right,
again, I think it should be through the legislative process. It just doesn't make sense to me to have these tremendously important overarching issues of policy decided by this small little group of men and women.
So what do you think it's going to take specifically to abolish abortion in our state and then in the nation?
Well, it's going to have to be really at the national level first, and we can set the stage for that, of course, by passing things like personhood legislation, which would then be challenged, and that would percolate its way up through the federal system and get to the Supreme Court and allow it to have an opportunity to overrule Roe versus Wade. A couple things I think we need to keep in mind, though. We have Brett Kavanaugh is the current nominee for the court, and if you just listen to various commentator types, at least most of the ones I listen to, it sounds as if he is very likely to be confirmed. As best we can tell, most people seem to feel that he is a pro-life kind of guy. But even if a case comes up in the next year or two and the court in fact overturns Roe versus Wade, all that's going to do is send the issue back to the states. The law is going to be what it was before 1973,
sure,
in which basically it was a patchwork issue, and each state had its had its own statutes,
which for me would be a great start, because at least in South Carolina,
at least, and what you would of course see then is most of your red states, your more conservative states, South Carolina being one of them, would outlaw abortion. Obviously, your Californias and New York and Massachusetts and places like that would
keep
it absolutely legal. There's no question about that. And so then, it would become more of a fight to, do we outlaw this at a national level, or do we do it state by state? How do we go about that? So, but the other thing too to keep in mind is, even if by whatever means abortion were made, were outlawed nationally tomorrow, that's not going to end abortions. I mean, obviously you've got, folks, your Planned Parenthood folks, your NARAL folks, and, they are strident, in some cases to the point of zealotry about abortion. And, I can only imagine the analogies they would draw to the Underground Railroad and Harriet Tubman, and how they were,
it's really kind of ironic.
Yeah, taking ladies, here and there to have abortions, and they would, make heroes out of, these doctors that were willing to do it illegally. So again, yes, we go back to our kind of our original point that A, we need to outlaw the practice, but B, we got to outcompete it. We got to outlove.
Yeah, and actually, what you just said, it's really kind of ironic, because I know exactly what you're talking about, because when the Emancipation Proclamation was put forth and laws were put into place that outlawed slavery, that wasn't the end of it.
No.
And especially in the South, people died trying to uphold that ideal. in the South, that there was still kind of a war, even of sorts, maybe not official, but, a definite, violence and upheaval over that issue for a long time. And, people really had to sacrifice in order to be able to make this something that the country eventually accepted. And so undoubtedly, even if abortion, like you said, is abolished, that's something that we're within our culture that we're going to have to fight anyway. But of course, it makes it a slightly different ball game than this person's going to do something and there's nothing you can do about it,
Sure.
kind of thing. So absolutely. So my question is, what do you think your role is when it comes into supporting pro-life and that kind of legislation?
If I'm elected, if I end up in the Senate, and that role, it would be to support pro-life causes wherever we can. In my personal life, there's a crisis pregnancy center that we've been doing some work with and supporting, and we've got the Daybreak, which does a wonderful job, and then
Life Bridge as well.
Life Bridge in Newberry.
So, on a broader scheme, how does your faith intersect with how you believe you will govern if you're elected?
Whether we want to or not, we've all got a paradigm that we from which we see the world. Even if you want to call yourself an atheist or whatnot, we're all going to have a God. We're all going to have something that's first in our life. Now, for some folks, that may kind of change and morph, over time as they kind of try one thing and then the other. But ultimately, you're going to have one, whether you like it or not. So if you have decided that you are going to follow Christ, then you accept Christ and decide to follow him as your Lord and Savior. And I think that the principles that Christ puts forth in the Gospels, that's how you make decisions, and it can't help but impact your view on anything, and it impacts the way I do my job here, or my relationships with my family and with my friends. And it would do that certainly as a senator, and loving your neighbor as yourself, as we see Christ telling us. I can't think of any better way to state how we're supposed to treat one another.
Can't agree more on that one. So supposing that you're elected, there's even the reason why you're being elected. There's a lot of corruption that happens, a lot of pressure that happens when you go into the government. And so good people go into government and end up falling prey to a lot of temptations, a lot of pressure and things like that. So what is your plan to keep yourself within the philosophies that you came in with? Like, do you have some type of support structure? Do you have some plan to be able to, to combat that for yourself?
Sure. Term limits are a good idea because does it rule out all that? No. Does it make it a little better in that people know they're going to be moving out the door, so they're less likely to, buy into the system? I think so. I do think as you get a little older, it helps you to have, perspective, and you're just more grounded in what you believe and why you believe it, and how you're going to live your life. And in addition to that, just, a lot of prayer, and I have a tremendous support group of my family. I attend Riverland Hills Baptist Church. I'm a member there, and my Sunday school class is just fantastic. There are just wonderful, wonderful people in there that we've known now for getting close to 20 years, and they provide just an amazing support structure. And
right.
I think if you stay in the Word and you continue to pray that Christ will be done in your life, and you mean it, and that can be hard sometimes, because when I want to do this, and that may not be what God has in store for me right now, man, that is so tough.
Yeah.
But in any event, if you willfully chart the course of your life and order your life in accordance with what Christ has told us, I think that's all any of us can do.
You know what? It's been great talking with you. Not just now, but like what, especially if you become a South Carolina senator, a state senator here. How would you like people to pray for you?
I think for anybody that gets elected, pray that they would have wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Pray they be good listeners, because
Mm.
it, particularly in the political world where it's you want a message and you want to keep hammering home your point. You got to remember that you're only going to make good decisions if you have good information. You're only going to have
Sure.
good information if you're willing to listen and understand
Good point.
what's coming into you. And then also, I think praying for the families, because I know it is tough. My wife has certainly through this campaign already. She has had a ton of work to do, and she's already got a lot going on.
Feeling the pressure already.
Yes, ma'am. It does put, I think, a bit of a burden on anybody's family, particularly those poor folks. I'm very blessed. We live right here in town, and the capital is just right there.
Right.
I think about those folks who live in Seneca or down in Hilton Head, and that's tough.
All right. Well, thanks so much,
Thank you,
Ben, and I really wish you good luck, and maybe we'll be able to speak again in the future.
I hope so. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Well, this is the Faith Works, and you can find it at beckewing.com, BECKEWING.com. Also, this will be posted on our Facebook page, so facebook.com/faithworks. And it also will be posted on our facebook.com/contagious disciple making as well. So we're going to have it on several different platforms. Take this particular video, share it around. People need to know the issues. They need to know the candidates. And so thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a blessed day.